The Big Ten has designated these two as rivals. That's much debate over the status of the rivalry between these two, but they have gotten together each year since the Huskers have joined the Big Ten. On the closing weekend of the season, Iowa has dominated and, of course, has the reputation of knowing how to win games. Nebraska knowing how to lose games, but maybe that's changing. Welcome into Hawkeyes Live, special edition here. You can either thank me or blame me if this accommodates your schedule. So we thank Corey Braddoff from the Hawkeye of the Storm is accommodating us as well. Corey, good to see you. How are you?
Doing all right. Yeah, we're wrapping things up. It's amazing. This football season goes by. We say it every year. I mean, we're not really wrapping it up. I know for some people, national people, including yourself, you're looking at this as like the climax, right? We're heading into, for a lot of teams, rivalry week, and then, we have championship week and all the lead up to that. So, I mean, I guess it's not really ending. I look at the regular season as the end in many regards. And for Iowa, it's the end. I mean, they're going to play a bowl game, but it's like, it's, there's going to be opt-outs, there's going to be portal entries. It's just, we've talked about it. I don't have anything against bowl games. In fact, I love bowl games, but this game is going to be probably the most fun fans are going to have again until next September. So let that sink in. I mean, Black Friday against a rival under the lights, cold, it might be close to setting the record for coldest temperature ever during a game at Kinnick. I mean, it's potentially going to be in that vicinity. So, so many storylines, but it's always a fun game. I mean, it's going to be a lot more fun than that Maryland game last week. I guess we should talk about that first, right?
Yeah, certainly Iowa dominated that game, controlled the game, tons of field goals. Jackson Stratton playing relatively well, and the running game certainly taking charge against the Maryland Terps. And it was very much what I expected and most expected out of that Iowa-Maryland game. Not just a complete blowout, but just a game in which Iowa was clearly the better football team.
Did you watch that game?
I watched it later.
Okay. You watched it. So let me ask you this, because, I'm very upfront and honest on my opinions. And I got ripped this week by a number of people for calling that game boring. It was boring. Mark, think about it. Now you tell me what's your opinion. Was it boring?
Well, I think I'm conjecturing that part of the boredom is because of the stakes or lack of stakes of the game.
That's part of it. And then when it's just run heavy, very little over the top, 11 a.m., no crowd, crappy broadcast in general. It's boring. This will not be a boring game. Packed stadium, blackout, cold. So you're gonna have. We may see McNamara. We could see Sullivan. Heck, we could see Marco Lainez. All four quarterbacks have a chance to be on the field this Friday. We don't know if any of them but Stratton are healthy, but all four of them have a chance to be there. These are cool storylines, and everybody wants to beat Nebraska. Nebraska's now qualified for a bowl game.
Yeah, there is little connection between Iowa and Maryland. They are just technically in the same conference, and I don't know that you can find two teams in the conference that have less to do with one another
except
than
the
Iowa
Brian
and Maryland.
Except the Brian connection.
The Brian connection, but in regards to just overall, obviously, once he changes his employment, then that takes that out of the equation. But yeah, I get that. And Nebraska, this is a game that people look forward to. Some people, again, as I noted off the top, and I see these comments made on social media and to the channel, and for all the years that we've done this show, that there's an argument as to whether this is a true rivalry, how significant it is.
It's a
but
rivalry.
It certainly has that Big Ten Western Division feel to it.
It is a rivalry, and I'm not one to just jump on rivalry games and declare them rivalries if they're not rivalries. This is a rivalry game. It was somewhat manufactured, but it also has storied history prior to this century, and It's just such a natural rivalry. There's so many. I think the Omaha Council Bluffs, you know, River. I don't know if you know how the two cities are broken up, but they're basically
Yes.
broken up by the river, and
Mhm.
so there's that, and there's a lot of Hawkeye fans and Husker fans on either side, and then you go up. The western side of the state has been very much divided. I think there's probably more Hawkeye fans in general on the Iowa side, but um, so it's there's just the border rivalry thing is just so natural, and there's so many kids that are recruited on both sides. These two schools really hit each other's areas hard. I mean, Iowa, of course, goes into Omaha, probably a little less than Nebraska goes into the state of Iowa. There's not a lot of talent west of Omaha, west of Lincoln, I should say. That'd probably be a little unfair to the people in Lincoln. But by the way, Cade Peterson in the chat wants to know, why is this on the Nebraska page of the Voice of College Football? That's what he's saying in the chat. You want me to put it
All
up on the
right.
screen?
Okay, this is what we do here at the Voice of College Football when we have a matchup between two teams within our network of channels. We simulcast on both outlets. So this Iowa show is on the Iowa channel, of course, and then also on the Nebraska channel. Earlier this week, Justin Adams broadcast his Nebraska show on the Iowa channel.
With all due respect to Cade, and I'm going to say this because I'm the Iowa guy, right? You're basically just saying I don't agree with you putting it on the Nebraska channel, because obviously you know why it's on the Nebraska channel. Iowa plays Nebraska. It's in the title. It says Iowa Hawkeyes Live 173 Nebraska Week. So you're obviously not asking out of genuine curiosity. You're asking in a snarky fashion, which is very much like Husker fans would do this week and any other week. So, anyways.
Yeah, I didn't make the decision to just arbitrarily put Iowa shows against Minnesota and Wisconsin on the Nebraska channel.
Listen, well, we can't have any games left.
Yeah,
Can
the
I do
bowl
this?
game.
Yeah, well, we don't know who they're going to play, but can I start broadcasting my Iowa women's basketball
Of course you
games
can.
on your Tennessee channel?
Oh, okay.
Actually, the women play Tennessee. Maybe we should start that. Maybe that would do something. It's actually not a terrible idea. It's actually not a terrible idea, Mark, because you might get some spillover, but you might also get some unsubscribed people.
My principled stance really just cringes against
know.
that. But the opportunity that just to see what it would do, I would be curious.
I would be curious. I'll tell you what, you are more than welcome to do that. Do you have a Tennessee channel?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know you had. I really forgot you had a Tennessee channel. They play Tennessee out in Brooklyn. Those are a couple of really solid women's basketball programs, and Iowa plays Tennessee in Brooklyn here in a few weeks. So you give it some deep thought and pondering, and you let me know.
I'll be running all sorts of analytics on it and figuring that out.
Okay.
Absolutely, I will be. All right. The here and now is a game against Nebraska, and the Huskers got past a Wisconsin team that's not very good. Of course, they blew them out, not to the degree that Iowa did, but had a dominant win in a game in which it was pretty much a pick'em game. And Nebraska has a long history, much like the Iowa series, of losing to Wisconsin. I went through that series, and they had lost like 11 of 12 against the Badgers. So they got through that hurdle, past that adversity of history, but they were at home, and now they go to Kinnick. They did win the game a couple years ago, 2022, when Spencer Petras got hurt and spoiled Iowa's season, getting to a Big Ten championship game. But other than that, again, Iowa's dominated this series.
I think it's kind of that game against Wisconsin last week. A little one. I think it's a little harder to read than maybe. It's easy just to say, well, it's a 6-5 Wisconsin, or excuse me, a 5-6 Wisconsin team. But some context: Wisconsin has played a rather difficult schedule. Okay, including a game against Alabama in the non-conference. They play the best team in the conference, I think. In Oregon, they played Penn State. They played USC on the road. And here's the other part about this: of late, throw the Iowa game out. Wisconsin competed for a lot of that Penn State game. They competed until the very end against Oregon, held the Ducks to 16 points. And then they blew out a couple of teams that several teams they were supposed to blow out in Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. You take out the Iowa game, I don't know. I don't. It's a hard Wisconsin team to evaluate, which makes it hard for me to evaluate Nebraska based on that. And maybe it's just a Wisconsin team that's checked out. Now, if Luke Fickell has lost his guys when they still have a chance to go to a bowl game, that's a bad sign for Badger fans. But I would you agree that Penn State, Wisconsin was competitive for much of that game, as was Oregon, Wisconsin?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Oregon game was a really good game. Wisconsin had a fourth quarter lead. They had a fourth quarter lead in both games. And so, yeah, maybe I'm being a little harsh on Wisconsin, but the record's not good. And they did beef up on 3 poor opponents.
They did.
But they beat them down.
Yeah, they did exactly what you're supposed to do against bad teams.
Yeah.
And frankly, Iowa has not done what they're supposed to do against bad teams this year. They've done to teams that we perceive to be average or middle of the pack to what they were supposed to do against the bad teams, right? Like the bad teams, Michigan State, UCLA, they struggle and lose to. And it's against those middle tier teams like Washington and Wisconsin,
Minnesota
that you and I thought preseason could lose that game, probably win because you're at home. Minnesota was on the road. Those are the games they've won with flying colors. It's been a very strange 11-game stretch, without question.
Have you done a preview on this game?
Just with Don. We did a post-game show. We did a 2-part post-game. We did a show Saturday without Don, and he had Missouri Valley Conference game he called for television, and then we did a show Sunday night. So we talked about it. I did cut up a nice long 10 to 15-minute segment with Coach Patterson that was published yesterday. I'll come out with my preview tomorrow. So I have not officially previewed it. I think the line is I think the line is a little fishy. That's my opinion. But I'm also not some great judge of Vegas lines, Vegas totals, Vegas, over-unders. I think it's a little. I would have anticipated with Nebraska's performance last week against Wisconsin for it to be more like maybe +3, but +5.5. And I don't know if it's gotten bet up or down, but is that the opening line that you're looking at, Mark?
That is the line that I caught. That is the line. I don't know at what point that was published.
Okay, so I'm seeing Iowa by 3.5 on ESPN.
Okay, it's been bet down.
So that's more that's closer to what I would anticipated to open at. So people are, I'm not the only one thinking that. So it's interesting that it opened where it opened. But
well, I don't want to be caught in a stereotype that Iowa just plays close games. They usually win them, but they're going to play close games. Therefore, I'm just going to scarf up 5.5 points. Which is now down to 3.5, but that's apparently what the betting public is doing because the game's at Iowa. So that's pretty much telling us that this is a pick'em, not a pick'em game because it's at Kinnick, but these teams are extremely comparable.
But what's crazy about that, Mark, is when's the last time Iowa's played a close game?
Yeah, I know. They're not this year.
They're actually not playing any close games this year. They have played one close game. One all year. I mean, with the exception, I should say, one close win. They lost at UCLA. You call that a close game. It was 2017. Close win. What game was that they won? No, they don't have any close wins. I'm sorry. I was thinking Iowa State, and they lost that game. So they've had 2 close games all year, and they lost both of them. 1-point loss to Iowa State, 3-point loss to UCLA. So they don't win close. At least they haven't this year. Now, they've won a lot more games going away. Right. We talked about Washington and Wisconsin and, easy, comfortable win last week against Maryland. But no, it's been very, I mean, that's the deviation from the norm is so stark in so many areas this year. You start with the offense, which is positive, but then the defensive struggles up front at times. And then you go, it's week to week. You don't know what you're going to get out of that. I think the front 4 defensively, the DBs have been a little suspect, which was probably, with losing Cooper in the offseason, that was probably the biggest question mark with that defense anyways. But they've been more than suspect in a couple of games. And then, the offense has been so much better in so many regards. And then the fact that they don't play close games, they have doubled Their score, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but Tim Lester's goal heading into the year was basically to like cut the numbers in half. So like they were 130th in FBS ranking for total offense last year. He wanted to be like 165. I think they're in 70, 75 range. And same for scoring. Like they went from 15 last year. They're averaging, I think, 30 plus this year. He's done a phenomenal job.
If we would have just had the offensive numbers in August, and you and I would have looked at the offensive numbers and looked at the schedule.
Yeah, what a disappointment. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. You can look at it glass half full if you want. I just don't know how you don't paint it as a disappointment. And I know people are tired of me saying that over the last few weeks, but, well, we have 4 weeks to talk about it because they played their way out of contention by, game 8, game 9? It's like, I don't know how else you paint it. How can you better your offense by that much? And your special teams basically sustained level. I mean, Caden Weegan is a finalist for return specialist of the year. Who would have thought that? You lose Cooper DeJean as a return specialist and you get one of the best in the country the very next year, a guy that was on the roster that really wasn't doing much of anything. And he ends up being maybe the best return specialist in the country. You get a kicker who's had do you realize, and I talked with Don about this the other day, we were talking about it on the air, Drew Stevens, he has missed 3 kicks all year. Want to know the distance on those 3 kicks that he's missed? Were you on the show when we were talking about this?
I don't believe so. They're all plus 55, aren't they?
He missed 1 from 51, missed a 56. That was against Ohio State, by the way. Missed a 56 against Wisconsin and a 58 against Michigan State. And he's hit a handful of 50 to 60-yard kicks. I mean, he has been phenomenal. And I say it every time I see him. He is an NFL kicker. I believe he will play in the league someday. I believe he'll start in the league someday. And that's hard to do. There have been a lot of good kickers here in the last 10 years at Iowa, but none of them have had the leg that he has. And he has been accurate. He has not missed a single kick from inside of 50 yards.
So again, getting back to this offensive output versus the defensive decline, I just find fascinating. And it was actually something that I wanted to bring up our last show, and then I ended up listening to you and Don quite a bit. I've been checking in on more of these shows.
I know. You were in the chat for a while the other day. I don't know if you were going in and out, but you were there for a while.
Yeah. I was there. And which comes to mind just because you usually get on me for not checking in on too many shows. But I've watched more from the Hawkeye of the Storm in the last 6 weeks.
Well, I appreciate that.
I've just checked in and it's been really good. So everyone should check out, of course, the men's and women's basketball is what's going to be front and center. But of course, there's going to be a ton of football content with the transfer portal and National Signing Day coming up in the bowl game.
And by the way, if that Sunday game meant more or wasn't as boring, we would have had a much bigger crowd. I don't know the last time for a Saturday or Sunday show with Coach Patterson that here 4 days removed, we are at 1.3 thousand views for that post-game show on Sunday night.
It's exactly what it was, a non-eventful game against a non-eventful opponent that nobody cares about. The season's been lost. If they had crashed and burned, you might have more people. If they were like 3-8 right now.
Oh yeah.
But of course, they're pretty much the same team, but they lost games early, so they're out of it, and it's just kind of in this mid-range. And
it's called, what we call that in tennis is no man's land, right?
Yeah.
So they're stuck in no man's land in a sense.
That's when you haven't gone far enough to the net, and you're not playing the baseline.
Right. Yeah, you're kind of at the service line, or we call it the kitchen or the no man's land. I guess it'd be the service line, service box. I don't know. It's been a while since I've played seriously, but yeah, I mean, they're in a place now where fans are not angry as much as just disappointed, but they're certainly not. They're the furthest thing from thrilled. I mean, there's nothing really to be thrilled, except there are some people that will just celebrate any win. But celebrating a win like we saw Saturday doesn't involve tuning in for a part 2 of a post-game show the next day. They're just, it's like we're going to have a drink and we're going to, sing Kumbaya. that's the kind of celebration that we're going to have after a win at Maryland. I've never seen a crowd like that in a bit. Maybe there are crowds like that, but man, it's amazing. It is amazing. It's kind of like Iowa men's basketball. The total lack of interest. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, from what I know of Maryland, maybe if Ohio State goes in there, Penn State, of course, is close, that they'll bring droves of people. But otherwise, yeah, if they're playing anybody from what was the Western Division or Rutgers, and if they're not really good, and when's the last time Maryland's been really good? It's been a long time. But even though there's not much to take away from this game in terms of it proving anything or accomplishing anything, a rival, the final game of the season at home under the lights. There'll be a big TV audience for this game. I don't think there's a game out there that really rivals it during that time slot. I forgot to look at the TV. I have looked at the TV schedule, but I don't recall. I don't think there's another game.
Yeah, what would be
anywhere
rival?
close to this
What
one.
could possibly rival it? I mean,
I'm sure there's another game. I'm sure ESPN's got a game on and somebody else, but I don't remember. There aren't many good games on Friday.
yeah, let me just pull it up here. So let's see. Friday, you've got Oregon State, Boise State in the morning, Colorado, Oklahoma State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. Spencer Petrus's Aggies. I don't even know if he's playing because he got dinged up last week. They play Colorado State in the afternoon. Georgia Tech, Georgia.
Ooh, yeah.
That's a good game.
Could be.
I mean, 7-4 versus 9-2. It's a Georgia team in line for a playoff berth. Utah, UCF doesn't have any implications.
No.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, there's really Georgia Tech, Georgia, and Iowa, Nebraska are really the only games that you probably care about, frankly. If you're
well, there's only 3 games on total.
I mean, Sam Houston and Liberty. Is Sam Houston in the FBS now?
Yes.
All right. Well, then that's it. Those are 2 decent teams, G5 teams, I guess.
As of last season, they were.
Yeah, if you're curious about Bowl Mania and trying to scout some early bowl picks, those are a couple of 8-win teams.
My guess is that Iowa and Nebraska will garnish 55 to 60% of the audience, and that Georgia Tech game will get 40 to 45%.
Can you address this comment from Cyhawk? This is Corey who calls in to my show. He really resents whenever I call that game this past Saturday boring. Stop calling moving a man in the opposite direction against his will boring. So let me just expose this take. And listen, Corey has a right to his opinion. He knows I respect his opinion. But let me just expose the take for a second, because if I put a bunch of 4th graders out on the field against Iowa and they're moving them against their will, and believe me, they're going to move them against their will in much more dramatic fashion than they moved Maryland, you're going to say that's exciting to watch. That just because you've got a team moving another team against their will does not mean it's not boring. Maybe an extreme example, but I mean.
And we also have to understand that the term boring, that is a opinion.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some people like to watch paint dry.
Really?
So most people would think that that's boring, but some would not.
Are you comparing Iowa's offense in recent years to watching paint dry? Because you would not be the first to make that comparison. Just so you're aware.
We've made like comparisons on this show, I'm sure. But getting back to, again, if it's a week before the season and we get the Tim Lester offensive numbers for the entire season, minus the Nebraska game, both of us are thinking, and I believe you picked this team to go 10-2.
Yeah.
I would have to double check. I believe I picked them to go 10-2. I might have said 9-3. I thought 10-2.
I think you had 10-2, no Big Ten championship appearance. And no playoff.
But if we would have seen those offensive numbers, we might have said, oh, they'll probably lose to Ohio State, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
and they shouldn't. That should have been what happened. I mean, they had no business losing at UCLA, Michigan State, and they were up 2 scores. Should have been 3 on Iowa State. Iowa State didn't have a first down until midway through the second quarter. They had no business losing any one of those 3 games.
But I did think, and again, this was a conversation I was about to have with you last week. We ran out of time. And then you and Don had it to a certain extent. And I posted a number where I went through a stat that I think is more impactful, more meaningful than the total yardage or passing yardage stat, and that's pass efficiency defense. It takes into account completion percentage, how many yards you're gaining per pass,
Yeah.
TD to pick ratio, and all of that. And Iowa solidly in the top 10, 4 or 5 straight years. And this season, number 41 in the country.
Telling. Yeah. Telling. I mean, I don't have a way to explain it other than they weren't quite as good at corner. I think we all sort of assumed that, because they had some real struggles, especially against Michigan State at corner. And I don't know why Deshaun Lee didn't play in that game, but they had some issues sorting out who was that second corner after Jamari. We thought somebody would emerge between TJ Hall, John Nestor, and Deshaun Lee. And they all had some pretty low moments. I don't know why Deshaun didn't play against Michigan State. I didn't think he played bad against Washington and never saw the field. I don't know if that was disciplinary or what, but that's part of it. And then the other part is, the front four just hasn't, I don't think was as, especially against UCLA. This is a team that couldn't run the ball on anybody. And oh, by the way, has not since run the ball against anybody. Like, that's the crazy part about both of those losses. Because after the Michigan State loss, one could easily, right after the Michigan State loss, one could say, well, Michigan State's coming off a bye. They've really progressed. They went right back to being the same mediocre team, right after that game. Same thing with UCLA. They're the same crappy team that they were before. So it's incredible. It's incredible how, it's not even incredible that they won. It's incredible how much better Iowa's defense made those two teams look in the losses. I mean, UCLA ran for like 250 yards. A team that averages like 70 on the year ran for 250 on the Iowa defense. Michigan State, I mean, what's his face? Aiden Childs. In that game, he looked like a Heisman dude. I mean, juking guys, it just, and I haven't watched a second of Aiden Childs since then, but I've seen the results. They've reverted right back to the mean, so to speak. So it's baffling. It's one of those things that we'll be able to talk about for a long time in the future, because 2023, or excuse me, 4 will go right where with 2016, 2010. There's, and that's going to be part of the Kirk Ferentz legacy, in addition to his successes, 2015 and 2009, and obviously 02 and 04. You also have to add in the big disappointing years where there was a lot of preseason hype and a lot of talent. And I think they have a chance to maybe set records this year with players drafted. Have a chance. They may not. I think 2010 was a real good year as well. But, man, they got a lot of dudes.
So, Corey, think how much both of us made fun of the Vegas over-under line at 7.5 wins, but here we are.
Well, here's what's crazy, and neither of us bet, nor would I, but we said, clearly take the over. I still think that's going to hit. Because I still think they're going to win.
Yeah.
I still think they're going to probably win on Friday, and so it'll still be correct. But yeah, no, you're right. They were a lot closer than we expected. But last year they got it dead wrong, right? They said 7.5 last year, and it was, they won 10, and we said the same thing a year ago.
Erica, thank you so much for the super chat. Hi, guys. How much longer do you think KF will be around? This is Erica's question. This is just, I give another 2 to 3 years at most. Go Hawks.
I think it's well, first of all, he breaks the record if he comes back. But does he want to come back and break the record and possibly go 6-6, 5-7? The schedule is a bear next year, and they lose so much. Now, if Kirk really, it's going to, I'm not saying he walks away after this season, but he's going to have a lot of confidence in his assistant coach's desire and ability to recruit the portal. And some of his assistants have done a nice job in the portal already, right? Tim Lester, how about grabbing Jacob Gill and Brendan Sullivan? What huge gets out of the portal and late to the party, getting those guys late in the process. So obviously they're going to need Lester to go out and get people. But they're really going to need people, I think, on defense. I mean, unless Phil's going to have to really speed up the development for some of these young guys because they lose so much on that side. They actually don't lose as much on offense.
We will, of course, honor the super chats, but folks, a lot of these questions, you can ask us in May. Can Iowa football win a national championship?
Can they? Boy, in the 12-team format, I think it makes it hard. Like, is it going to be easier for them to make the playoff? Yes. Harder for them to win? Yes. Right?
Yeah.
You might be able to, in the old format, if you have what happened in 2015 against Michigan State, say you win that game, okay, all of a sudden we're 2 wins away from it. Now, if you find a way in, you're still going to be, because they're likely not going to ever qualify for a bye with the format as it is now, the expanded conference. They're going to have to win. What are you looking?
I'm saying 4 games. Yeah. You have to win 4 games.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, is it possible? Sure, anything's possible, but the new format hurts their chances at a national title, I think.
Iowa, Nebraska, and we open this show by stating that, of course, Iowa's owned the series since the Big Ten brought in the Huskers, and that Iowa is used to winning, at least in previous years, used to winning the close games. They're known for winning the close games. Nebraska known for losing the close games. But, hey, 6-5 looks pretty. That means a bowl eligible Nebraska team comes to Kinnick Stadium. We got our buddy Justin Adams, host on the Nebraska channel, to help us break it down. Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Is my sound okay? Just double checking.
Perfect.
All right, just making sure. Yeah, 6 wins. Never thought I would be this excited about 6 wins, but here we are. So broke a streak against Wisconsin. So
are we really that confident, Mark, that Nebraska wouldn't have made a bowl game at 5 wins? I mean, with the number of teams, last year you start having teams that don't play in bowl games, don't accept invitations. Are we sure that's not going to happen this year and create even more of a need for under 500 teams, sub 500 teams?
Well, I'll let Justin speak to that, but I think it's more about showing that we can have a winning record or a non-losing record and get to a bowl game, not just that we were gifted this position by
I get it.
Our graduation rate.
Yeah, I think the kind of the tiebreaker there is kind of academics. I'm pretty sure, like 90% sure that's what they go by when it comes to the 5-win teams and who gets in and who gets out. So, but still, like at that rate, like I would not have felt good about a 5-win Nebraska team getting in. That wouldn't have done much for me. I just think like we needed to get this 800-pound gorilla off our back, get to 6 wins, because, it's one of those things where Nebraska fans are losing a lot of patience because we were so patient with Frost. And it seems like, Matt Rule and guys who are not from within the program previously don't get that same leash. So even there were rumblings from some Nebraska fans talking about, Matt Rule being on the hot seat if he didn't get there this year. And I was going to say this whole time, I'm giving him a 3-year window, and I'll judge him in year 3. Yeah. Because 1 and 2 is typically where that, transition happens. But in year 3, that's when the step needs to be taken for sure. So he saved himself. I think he bought himself some time, especially with the Holgorsen transition, because with Satterfield, it was rough.
How many years did he give Frost?
We ended up with he was hired in 2017. So 5.
Yeah. So why would Rule get a shorter leash than Frost? Because Frost was the promised son. I mean, I wouldn't even think about evaluating Rule until the end of year 3.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like Frost, really, it was just that he's the prodigal son return, and I just think everybody had that nostalgia. He won a national championship with us and stuff like that, and it was the pomp and circumstance around it, and everybody in the athletic department seemed bought in. And he just had way too much of a leash, and there was not enough accountability on that.
He hit the squandering and debauchery part of that.
Yep, and the recruiting aspect of it was a disaster. He had no secondary or tertiary state. He was trying to recruit at Florida a lot, but once those Florida teams got a little bit better, we started losing some of those recruits. And again, most of the recruits that he had in those recruiting classes didn't make it to campus, or never made it to the field. Like Keyshawn Johnson Jr., made it to campus, a lot of noise around him, but something ended up happening. He got kicked off. And so there was a lot of that stuff happening. And it seems like Matt Rule has turned the recruiting department around. And we're getting a lot more people on campus. But the other part of it is we're retaining a lot more of our roster. Now, this 105 scholarship limit's a whole different ballgame. We're probably going to lose 40, 50 players, but we returned 78% of our offensive or our total production last year. So that's a good sign. And I feel like he is really built within the 500-mile radius now. And I think those are the players that are typically the stalwarts of your program. Those are the guys that you build from, because those are the guys that are probably most likely to stay with you for the majority of your time there. And with a developmental program, that's a big thing. Looking back when Nebraska was really good in their heyday, about 35 to 40% of the roster was within that 500-mile radius. And that was down to about 7 to 9% under Scott Frost between his total roster. And it's back up around the 30% range under Matt Rule. So it's really a commitment and to kind of reestablishing those ties. And he's been recruiting a lot heavier in Texas. We lost Texas as a pipeline state in the move over to the Big Ten. So a lot of talent coming out of there. So we do have to have our foot in Texas for sure.
Well, I really just have a couple things to ask Justin, and Mark, if you have a couple things too. There's some eerie similarities between this game and 2 years ago. Now, 2 years ago, Iowa was, they should have won the Big Ten West. You win that game and you somehow back your way into the Big Ten title game at 8-4. They end up losing. A couple things to note here. That was a 7-4 team, just like this Iowa team. That was a game against Nebraska that was played in Kinnick. That was also a game that was played where Iowa was down their best cornerback in Cooper DeJean, who was knocked out of that game early. Jamari Harris will not play Friday night. Big storyline, right? Because that game 2 years ago, it ended up being the story of a future NFL receiver and wearing red, wearing white, taking advantage of a couple of young corners in Jamison Heights and TJ Hall. Now, one other thing to know, Spencer Petras got knocked out of that game. Alex Padilla actually almost led that team to a comeback. We have no idea who's playing quarterback on Friday. We think it's fourth stringer Jackson Stratton. So there are a lot of similarities. Not strong at corner or quarterback. 7-4 Kinnick.
Yes.
Now, I don't know temperature-wise what it was 2 years ago. That's a big storyline this week. The cold, I'm guessing, because Dylan Raiola was from where in high school? Remind me.
He played at Buford, Georgia as his last stop.
So my question is, how familiar is he with this level of cold?
He's a stupid question. He's from Nebraska because his dad played at Nebraska. So he was kind of born and raised there. He did move around a little bit for high school. I believe he was in Arizona at one point, but moved over to Buford, Georgia whenever he was committed to Georgia. So that way he could be closer to Athens.
So what's the coldest he's played in an actual game? I mean,
an actual game? Oh, I don't think we've had a really cold game with him at quarterback.
This is new territory. I mean, I don't know that that's going to make a difference. I'm sure some guys just acclimate just fine, but we're talking like single digits potentially, Mark, or teens.
Yeah, could so, I would not be surprised if that does have an effect for sure.
So you wonder, and then Coach Patterson mentioned Sunday. This is just football 101.
Oh, Dion, that's right. I'm sorry, Dion's right. Detroit, because that's where his dad was playing when he was born. So,
well, totally. Obviously, it's cold in Detroit. Totally different when you're playing in a college football game, right? And so they're going to have warmers on the sidelines, and he'll have, I'm sure, a warmer. He wants to look like Patrick Mahomes, so he'll have a warmer in front of his jersey. He'll put his hands in there. No, I'm just saying. Am I wrong on that? I just going by what I see, I guess.
What is with that?
Wants to be Patrick
he's had his haircut like that since the 7th grade. He wears 15 for Tim Tebow. Him and Patrick Mahomes are good friends, and they train together in the offseason. They have the same quarterback coach, so it makes sense why their play style and their mannerisms are a lot of similar things. The sunglass thing, I think it's two guys who are similar Oakleys, but and they look very similar in stature. Now I agree that like I feel like he plays into it a little bit with some of the celebrations and some of the stuff he does.
He wants to be Patrick Mahomes. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not ripping him for it. I'm just saying he wants to be Patrick Mahomes.
I don't think he necessarily like I have an issue like and if he, you know, because he does train with him in the offseason and stuff like that. I have no problem with him like looking up to him and kind of wanting to emulate him. But whenever people just go like haircut, the number and all that stuff that isn't actually Mahomes, because you know, like I said, he's had 15 for a while, and he talked about in a press conference it was Tebow. But yeah, sure. Some of the mannerisms, a lot of play styles, and they're built very similar. And so I can see a lot of that stuff and wanting to emulate, but I think that's what a lot of players do. You know, they look up to somebody and they want to emulate them. But I think it's gone a little too far.
See, I'm totally disconnected. See, Mark, Justin got all defensive because I said that. I didn't.
No, it's not you. Not you.
Way.
It's not you. It's more so the people. Because I have a post that went pretty viral about this yesterday that I've been dealing with on X. Yeah, so right. that's turned into a whole thing.
Interesting.
So because
I was gonna say I saw a video of Raiola doing the knee jump thing that.
Yeah, Mahomes back against Colorado. Yeah.
That's a Mahomes thing, right?
So I saw the side by side with Mahomes. I can't verify that he's the only quarterback that does it, but you know, they do a lot of similar stuff in that regard. Part of me wonders if a lot of that is him playing into it. But again, you know, they do a lot of they kind of play and train together. So if they do some similar stuff like that, like it makes sense. But yeah, so just the majority of the dumb stuff though, like the haircut, the glasses, the number and all that, and just the way he looks and was built to look when he was, you know, born, he doesn't have really choice in that. So it's down a little bit more, Mark. It'll be a Kansas picture. Go down, 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 down. Go down. There it is. Because scroll down, you can see what I retweeted. It's this whole celebration where they do this, which a million players do. It's very similar. So
Fox College Football is even tweeting it.
Well, they want engagements. They want engagements.
Right. I get it.
So
he got 377 likes for it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It went crazy. People were just popping off in the comments. People talking about Raiola, be yourself, and then people started arguing, and that's why I was like, when you brought that up, I was like, oh, I've been dealing with this for a few days. So
no, I just one thing Don said is you know, young quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. Jackson Stratton's a young quarterback. They're both going up against each other here, assuming Cade and Brendan both are out.
Yeah.
So 2 young quarterbacks, but one of them's playing on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's one who's more experienced, yeah, Dylan Raiola has more game experience, but Jackson Stratton is I think a third-year guy. Mm-hmm. So obviously the moment's big for him, but he did get the start last week against Maryland. Totally different, right? But he's going to have the home crowd behind him. So yeah, who will crack first? I mean, I would, you know this, Justin, because you're a Big Ten guy. Teams, especially inexperienced quarterbacks, and Dylan, I wouldn't call Raiola an inexperienced, but he is a freshman, struggle in Kinnick, and especially back him up into that north end zone. I mean, you know, every year it seems like now, especially since that renovation in that north end zone, it's so loud. Nebraska's had, I mean, go back to the clap gate, right?
Yeah.
Was it last year? Wasn't it last year that all they've had snapping issues, right? You're snapping it over the head of the quarterback. There's been a lot like that, stuff like that when this game is played, and it's going to be packed. It's a blackout. You're going to. Hey, Iowa's really good still controlling field position. They dominated the field last week against Maryland, and that was exactly what Kirk wanted to do. It's going to be exactly what he wants to do this weekend. It's exactly how he should play it. I said last week, if the game plan transpired the way I anticipated it would, it was going to be a very boring game. I was right about that. I don't think it'll be as boring this weekend partly because it's a rivalry, so that makes it less boring. And then B, it's in Kinnick. It'll be packed. It's going to be cold. So there's going to be that storyline. There's so much more about this that's exciting and fun.
Yeah.
It's a primetime game, even though I don't love the night game this late in the year. Yeah. So, but I do think there's a good chance Kirk wants to make this. He absolutely wants to make it a battle of field position. And I think without question, I'm not, surprising anybody here. if they do that, huge advantage Iowa, because that's what Iowa does. And especially if you can play out that north end zone and people are going to be loud. I don't think noise is going to be a problem. Don made one comment on Sunday night that he hoped fans, because he's going to be there, he hopes fans will find a way to get loud in the cold. I've been into plenty of cold games.
It'll be loud.
People don't have any problem yet.
No.
Like, you'd rather yell when you're cold, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It almost keeps you a little, kind of keeps you warm.
And it's in Iowa. It's not like they're not used to it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this may be it's got a chance, Justin, to be the coldest game on record in Kinnick.
That's crazy.
It's got a chance. And that's, I'd add. And by the way, Mark, Iowa State has a huge game against Kansas State in this state on Saturday as well. And that game's a night game, which I think both are very stupid. Because if this game had more implications, I'd probably be complaining. I think it's a cool novelty, but I don't think it's necessary. I think it's better for holistically for the integrity of the game and for the quality of the game for a late November game to be played earlier in the day.
Television determines who plays where,
Yep.
and that's all that matters. And they want all the time slots filled.
Yep.
So somebody's going to be playing at night somewhere. Are they all going to be in Florida and California, I guess?
Well, I mean, yeah, yes. The answer to your question is yes. The Big Ten obviously can't, but you do have USC and UCLA in the conference now. So
it's one of those things, like, we can't say for certain. Like, I can't sit here and say, like, yeah, he's going to be fine in the cold just because we haven't seen it. So, that's a big question mark, of course. But to your point earlier, where you're talking about just the undisciplined play, and one of the keys that I've talked about is just what Iowa does, they do well, right? And Iowa does not beat themselves. And so Nebraska has to play a very, very disciplined game. And what I think is the major key in this one, right, is you have, your weakness at quarterback against our kind of weakness right now on the defensive side of our cornerbacks, our secondary. So I do think that's an important matchup. But I think the biggest thing that Iowa can do to confuse Raiola is really try to mix up things pre-snap, give him different looks, because under Holgorsen, it seems like he's had a little bit more calmness in the pocket and checking at the line of scrimmage, checking out of stuff, and having the ability to do that. But he's young, right? And so he hasn't gone against a lot of defenses who can really scheme up against him and try to confuse him pre-snap. And I think Iowa can potentially do that, because I think that's going to be their one advantage over him being a freshman quarterback. I just think this is a game that's really going to come down to winning on third down. And it's kind of like you said, if we let Iowa establish their game plan, I'm very scared of outside zone against Iowa, very scared of outside zone. If we let them, if we let y'all establish the run, that's where we've gotten in trouble this year. Indiana, we let Justice Ellison come out with a long run on on the first drive of the game. Against Illinois, they continued to, they had great yards per carry, but they just continued to pound the rock. And eventually that opened up the pass game for them, because it got the defense on the heels, just because they were moving, the H back across, and they were bringing them out in a myriad of ways. And a lot of what Nebraska struggled with on the defensive side of the ball lately is team defense. And that's what we had last year that I feel like we're not having this year, is just the complementary defense. We have some good individual performances, but team defense is lacking. So if Iowa's able to get Nebraska on their heels, I think that's where they'll have success. It's just a matter of the explosive plays, because that's what's been kind of our kryptonite here lately, is if Iowa can kind of bring us down enough to kind of be able to beat us over the top potentially, because regardless of anything, Caleb Johnson is going to be tough to stop. But at the very least, if you can, put them in situations where they have to, fight third and long and stuff like that, I think that's the recipe for success. And then just Holgorsen coming in and the way he simplified this offense, Raiola looks so much calmer in the pocket. Glenn Thomas says calm feet equal calm mind, right? And so watching the film, his feet have completely calmed down, just because what Satterfield was doing was way overcomplicated. And all Holgorsen did was come in and simplify that. And the simplest thing he did was start to target the short part of the field. We threw about 21% to the short middle of the field, or the short 0 to 9 yards part of the field, 21% roughly against UCLA. That went up to about 36% against USC, and we were 12 for 12 in that range. We were 4 for 6 against UCLA. That was when Satterfield was there. And then we threw it about 50% of the time this last week to the short part of the field. So it's very much a matter of getting him in rhythm and trying to get him some short throws early, just to, whether it goes for 2 yards, whether it goes for 3 yards, it's just seeing that ball come out of his hands and hit his receivers, and getting him in that rhythm is going to be important. So I think if Iowa is to effectively, come out with their game plan, I think it's going to be a matter of trying to stop that and really trying to keep him out of getting into a rhythm, because I think that's when he'll start to kind of relax and get with the flow of the game. So I'm really interested to see this Holgorsen offense go against a tough, disciplined defense like Iowa has. So,
well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying they're not disciplined, but they're very beatable compared to last year, compared to the year before that, the year before that, the year before that, year before that. We just kind of outline that. So I think there's opportunities. And obviously, Holgorsen is a very good offensive coach, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a reason why it's such a household name. And
expect a lot of mesh plays.
Okay, well, that's
yeah.
So one thing that I think is fair is, we talked about 2 years ago. He's going to be able to look at UCLA and Michigan State and figure out, okay, where are we able to kind of emulate or replicate what those two teams were able to do to Iowa's defense, because I mean, they completely made Iowa's, not that Jay Higgins played poorly, but tackling in space was a problem. Finding seams, finding spots on the field where, there's just confused DBs, confused defenders at some level. I do think one thing to keep in mind on Saturday, Mark, and this is one thing that we've been saying about Nebraska for years. Go back and look almost every time these two teams play. One of the reasons why Iowa's been so dominant in this series, whether it's been Scott Frost, I even go back to last year, or, I'm trying to think, Riley, whoever it's been over since Bo Pelini.
Yeah,
guys,
Mike Riley was after him.
This series has been decided with who's going to make the big special teams mistake or turnover.
Or the walk-off field goal.
Walk-off, yeah, special teams. I mean, I think about was it the fumble interception caught by, oh man, who was that? Iowa defensive lineman a few years ago. Somebody will be able to tell me.
The one that pops in my head is was it Hawkinson that caught that third or fourth down kind of at midfield?
Yeah, they got a field goal out of that.
I remember that one as well.
Made the field goal to win.
Last year was a double interception where Nebraska
oh my god
off at midfield,
and then Iowa has
they only need 10 yards and they can kick the game winner, but
they get their longest run of the game.
Yeah, I mean, you have the Mir Smith-Marset kickoff return for a touchdown where he had a couple of big plays that year, but special teams are always big. Kyler Fisher blocks or they block a punt and return it to the end zone. Was that 2021, I think, and they came back and won that game in Lincoln.
It might have also been 21 that Taylor Martinez has a drive going. They're only down by a field goal, maybe 4 points. And then all of a sudden there's a strip sack, game over.
Not Taylor Martinez.
Adrian
Martinez.
Yeah. It gets messed up a lot.
Yeah.
I hear that.
Taylor about 10 years before that.
Yeah, I think Miguel Racino's had a game-winning kick against Nebraska. I know Keith Duncan had the one where he blew the kiss to the crowd. Maybe even Caleb Shudak had one. It seems like every Iowa kicker has a game-winning field goal against Nebraska. So it's just always special teams and turnovers.
I think it was like 4 of the last 8 have ended on like a walk-off field goal or something like that. Something crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, close games, you have a young quarterback on each side.
Yeah.
It is in Kinnick, and history tells you that Iowa is going to be more disciplined in those moments and better on special teams in general than Nebraska. But that's why the game's played 2 years ago. We probably would have said the same thing in spite of the fact that Iowa had horrendous quarterback play and a horrendous offense. But if they can look, I think there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You don't not load the box down in and down out on Friday night. That's you have to make Jackson, assuming Jackson Stratton is the guy, you have to make him throw. And that is his best quality is a big arm, but he's totally unproven. I don't care what he did against Maryland last week. He was asked to throw, I think, 14 times total. You have to load the box and figure, can you figure out a way to hold Caleb Johnson to under 100 yards? If you do that, you've got a good chance of winning.
Yep.
Because Jackson Stratton, I mean, we just don't know what he's going to be able to do. We also don't know, he's down one of his 2 or 3 best receivers in Reese Vanderzee. They have been very underwhelming with tight end involvement with the pass offense this year, which is obviously another strange facet to this new look offense. So I don't know how you break it down much. I think you broke it down well from a Nebraska point of view. I just think if Iowa can figure out a way to run through a loaded box, which is easier said than done, then you probably win this game the way they win every game in this series. If they can't, I don't have a lot of confidence in Jackson Stratton throwing, but it's because I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and to your point, like it's one of those things that everybody who has been able to establish the run early, or at least kind of wear our defense down through the run, or just kind of keep it consistently going throughout. Like Illinois, we let them play into their game plan because we let them just continue to run at us, and then they started ripping off longer and longer runs. It's going to be a matter of trying to slow him down as much as possible and not let our defense get on our heels, get spread out, because that's when we've had issues. But whenever we're able to kind of stay within, kind of like within that box, and teams can't throw us out of it, because it's been the explosive play, it's been the deep ball, right? Luke Gifford has kind of been our safety over the top, and he's gotten beat a lot this year. Just his eyes being in the wrong place, or, he gets sucked down by, an underneath route that's meant to draw him down. It happened against Indiana. It happened against Ohio State in back-to-back weeks. Almost the same play. Indiana got sacked on that play, but the seam was wide open. They got past him. And then Ohio State ran almost the same exact play the next week. Same thing. Just a little bit. They went on an Ohio route concept instead, but it went right up the seam. So it's the explosive plays that have been against Nebraska. So I just think it's going to be a matter of who can effectively take them out of what they want to do. And then I just think the battle of third down is so important, especially for us, because we can't let Iowa kind of wear us down. And that's the thing. I think Nebraska has to try to come out kind of like they did quick and early last week. I think that's going to be a big part of it. I think that first drive is very, very important for us.
And Iowa's been better on critical downs this year. And credit to Jackson Stratton in 2 games where he's played a little bit against UCLA and last week. He's been pretty good on third downs. In fact, he's converted some third and medium to third and long. But Iowa in general has been better on third down. And also recent history tells us Iowa's best chance of making a big play is finding a way to get Caleb Johnson out on the edge.
Yeah.
And once he gets out in open field, he's gone. But could Tim Lester, Mark? Maybe Tim Lester finds a way to finally utilize. He really hasn't utilized play action much this year. And Coach Patterson broke it down beautifully Sunday night as to why this new system, it's a little harder even with a dominant run game to generate play action. It's harder to generate play action out of the shotgun, but maybe Tim Lester finally takes advantage and has built enough tendency now where, let it fly. And so he's got a guy with a big arm.
Yeah.
That's what he's got this week.
Our top corner's down, Tommy Hill. So last week we had a guy who got his first game experience, Bly Hill, and he got beat a couple times. He came into the second half because our secondary was just struggling that bad. Deshaun Singleton was getting beat left and right. He did end up getting a pick, but the first half, it almost didn't make up for what he did in the first half. That long deep ball, that was Gifford getting beat on that deep ball that Wisconsin was able to score on later on in that game. So that was Gifford getting beat. Bly Hill was tailing him, but Gifford was the deep safety over the top. He was playing center field and he got drawn down, so he didn't have help over the top. Then Bly Hill got beat on the 2-point conversion on the out route. So our secondary is definitely susceptible if you can kind of drop those concepts and try to get our eyes lost, because in the 3-3-5, I think that's the most important thing is your eyes. You have to know where the ball is, because there's so many one-on-ones and there's so much complementary defense required, because it's a very risk-reward style of defense, just in the nature of it. I mean, you got 3 guys up front. You have to bring a lot of stunts. I'm hoping they can do similar to what they did against Ohio State, where they went a little bit more bare fronts, where we didn't see that against Indiana. And so I'm hoping we can just get a little bit, maybe 4 hands down, at the line of scrimmage in the dirt, and then try to get creative from there, bring pressures. But I think the biggest thing is trying to get to third and longs, and that way our pass rushers can kind of pin their ears back and try to get after the quarterback. So,
and to summarize all what I had, Takun's question in the chat, another question: can Raiola handle the Kinnick at night environment? That is, to me, forget the cold for a second. The biggest thing in this game on that side of the ball, it's not the cold. It's Raiola dealing with the environment, the moment, because a lot of young guys have had problems with that. So that's a bigger factor than cold weather. But it should be a fun game, Mark. It always is.
Yeah, I expect this one to. I can't really predict this being a heavy, one-sided affair either way. Just no matter how good or bad these teams, like I mentioned before, no matter how good or bad they are, we can expect probably a dogfight to some extent for sure.
I don't know if Nebraska just played its best game of the year in Columbus, or that was Ohio State with a bit of an issue along the offensive line that they've since fixed.
Little both.
Combination, yeah. There, because obviously that's the toughest game. Ohio State's they looked brutal trying to move the ball on that day against Nebraska, but they got it done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think the good news for you, Justin, and for Luke Gifford is that I don't think Jeremiah Smith's going to be available this weekend to play for Iowa.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Mark, you have no idea.
Yep. That's a very good thing. And yeah, to that point, Ohio State, that was a game where we were able to stop the run and we had success. We just had no offense. So that's been the recipe. But when you're going against Caleb Johnson, for what it's worth, Emmett Johnson, our running back, has I think the same exact EPA as Caleb Johnson. However, he's done it in a lot less time frame. Caleb Johnson has kind of been this guy throughout the season. So that's my big worry is just trying to make sure that when they slide the line of scrimmage, especially on those outside zones, or they run those counters, like they're going to try to get us flow in the wrong direction. And Iowa's very good at setting up their blocks. They're very good at dual blocking. Like they know what to do. They're well coached on the offensive line and on that front. So we're going to need our experience to really show up. And Tony White's going to have to scheme up a good game because, like I said, it's been a little bit up and down this season. But anytime he's gotten beat, he's recovered. He's made some changes. But this is a different animal that we're dealing with in the backfield. So it's going to be fun to see. And I do think Raiola, well, naturally I'm a Nebraska fan, so I'm going to say this, but I think Raiola is good for the moment just because he played high level ball in Buford. He played that is a really good team nationally as well. So he's played in big moments. And then the Colorado game, that was at home naturally, but just, I think that was a big important thing for him to go out there in a big game environment, everybody watching, kind of a hatred thing. Like I think some of these games have kind of at least given him some experience for that moment. I think now that he's feeling a little bit calmer, I'm hoping that can carry through to the Iowa game. But we have seen when he gets pressured, he does start to get happy feet in the pocket and he will go away from his reads. So we're gonna have to just what kind of Dana Holgerson's been doing is just get the ball at his hand as quick as possible and try to get him in rhythm. And that's going to be, to me, that's going to be the story of the day, is whether we can get him in a rhythm or not.
He played at the LA Coliseum against USC. He played in Columbus in front of 105,000 people there. Yeah. So I'll wrap it up, at least for me, with this note to ask you, this appears to be a much bigger game for Nebraska than it is for Iowa. Iowa's coming off a disappointing season. They're used to going 7, 8, 9 wins plus. Again, disappointing season. Nebraska, sure, they got their bowl game, but they got one monkey off their back. They had gone through some wretched 1-11 stretch against Wisconsin.
Yep.
They dominate the game in the second half. They get that off their back. And it just a much more of a feel-good story and a better vibe going into the bowl game at 7-5 with a winning record rather than 6-6. So it just seems as though Nebraska's got more incentive. Iowa's beating them like a drum, although most of these players haven't really experienced that too much. But still, just hearing that Iowa always beats them like a drum, always wins the game. They get past Wisconsin. They can have a winning record going into bowl season.
Yep. And to be fair, that Wisconsin game, The reason we're feeling really good about that is because it's the first 4-quarter game that we've seen. Against Colorado, it was a 1-half game. We came out 28-0 in the half, didn't score again. UTEP, even early in the season, one touchdown in the second half. Like, that was the trend. Purdue scored nothing in the first half, came out and blew them out in the second half. So it's about if we can continue and have that full 4-quarter performance from our offense. And what Dana Holgorsen has done as well is he was talking about there's just our wide receivers were moving around too much where there wasn't a commitment to blocking. And against Northern Iowa, we had our highest pass block grade of the season, or our second best pass block grade of the season was against USC. So he's doing a lot of different things in terms of just kind of taking some of the pressure off of the line. It's just going to be, like I said, it's just going to be if Iowa can do something to disrupt that offense, because that's whenever, the air raid is specifically to kind of get you spread out as far as you can across the field and make you cover grass. And that opens up some windows for him. So it's just a matter of if we can keep those windows open, he can make his reads. Like I said, he's improved over the last couple of weeks, but it's one of those things that we've seen it for 2 weeks. Now let's see if we can see another improvement this week, or if he can continue that. So I'm excited to see this test, though. I really am.
Justin, appreciate you being here. For everyone that wants the Nebraska angle on the post game, of course, you join Justin right here on the Nebraska channel. If you want the Iowa angle, you join Corey from the Hawkeye of the Storm after the ball game with Coach Don Patterson. All right,
Absolutely.
guys.
Thank you, Mark. Hey,
appreciate you, man.
There hasn't been a blowout in this series, I don't think. Going back since I believe 2016, 2015, 2017. 2016-17 were lopsided. Every other one's been close. So I expect the same Friday night.
100%.
Tuesday's a big day for all of us here at the Voice of College Football as well. You've got Corey and I at 5:30 on Tuesday, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central. You've got Justin at 7 Eastern on the Huskers channel. Justin, appreciate you being here. Enjoy the game, but I will say for Iowa fans, I guess, don't enjoy it too much. And Corey, again, appreciate you making this happen.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.